Chapter 17. Dr. Kemp's Visitor. Dr. Kemp had continued writing in his study until the shots aroused him. Crack, 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 they came, one after the other.
"Hello,"
said Dr. Kemp, putting his pen into his mouth again and listening.
"Who's letting off revolvers in Burdock? What are the arses at now?"
He went to the south window, threw it up, and leaning out, stared down on the network of windows, beaded gas lamps, and shops, with its black interstices of roof and yard that made up the town at night.
"Looks like a crowd down the hill,"
he said,
"by the cricketers,"
and remained watching. Thence his eyes wandered over the town to far away, where the ship's lights shone and the pier glowed, a little illuminated faceted pavilion like a gem of yellow light. The moon in its first quarter hung over the westward hill, and the stars were clear and almost tropically bright. After 5 minutes, during which his mind had traveled into a remote speculation of social conditions of the future and lost itself at last over the time dimension, Dr. Kemp roused himself with a sigh, pulled down the window again, and returned to his writing desk. It must have been about an hour after this that the front doorbell rang. He had been writing slackly and with intervals of abstraction since the shots. He sat listening. He heard the servant answer the door and waited for her feet on the staircase, but she did not come.
"Wonder what that was,"
said Dr. Kemp. He tried to resume his work, failed, got up, went downstairs from his study to the landing, rang, and called over the balustrade to the housemaid as she appeared in the hall below.
"Was that a letter?"
he asked.
"Only a runaway ring, sir,"
she answered.
"I'm restless tonight,"
he said to himself. He went back to his study, and this time attacked his work resolutely. In a little while he was hard at work again, and the only sounds in the room were the ticking of the clock and the subdued shrillness of his quill, hurrying in the very center of the circle of light his lampshade threw on his table. It was 2 o'clock before Dr. Kemp had finished his work for the night. He rose, yawned, and went downstairs to bed. He had already removed his coat and vest when he noticed that he was thirsty. He took a candle and went down to the dining room in search of a siphon and whiskey. Dr. Kemp's scientific pursuits had made him a very observant man, and as he recrossed the hall, he noticed a dark spot on the linoleum near the mat at the foot of the stairs. He went on upstairs, and then it suddenly occurred to him to ask himself what the spot on the linoleum might be. Apparently some subconscious element was at work. At any rate, he turned with his burden, went back to the hall, put down the siphon and whiskey, and bending down, touched the spot. Without any great surprise, he found it had the stickiness and color of drying blood. He took up his burden again and returned upstairs, looking about him and trying to account for the blood spot. On the landing, he saw something and stopped astonished. The door handle of his own room was blood-stained. He looked at his own hand. It was quite clean. And then he remembered that the door of his room had been open when he came down from his study, and that consequently he had not touched the handle at all. He went straight into his room, his face quite calm, perhaps a trifle more resolute than usual. His glance, wandering inquisitively, fell on the bed. On the counterpane was a mess of blood, and the sheet had been torn. He had not noticed this before because he had walked straight to the dressing table. On the further side, the bedclothes were depressed, as if someone had been recently sitting there. Then he had an odd impression that he had heard a low voice say,
"Good heavens, Kemp!"
But Dr. Kemp was no believer in voices. He stood staring at the tumbled sheets. Was that really a voice? He looked about again, but noticed nothing further than the disordered and blood-stained bed. Then he distinctly heard a movement across the room, near the wash-hand stand. All men, however highly educated, retain some superstitious inklings. The feeling that is called eerie came upon him. He closed the door of the room, came forward to the dressing table, and put down his burdens. Suddenly, with a start, he perceived a coiled and blood-stained bandage of linen rag hanging in midair between him and the wash-hand stand. He stared at this in amazement. It was an empty bandage, a bandage properly tied but quite empty. He would have advanced to grasp it, but a touch arrested him, and a voice speaking quite close to him.
"Kemp?"
said the voice.
"Huh?"
said Kemp, with his mouth open.
"Keep Your nerve.
said the voice.
I'm an invisible man.
Kemp made no answer for a space, simply staring at the bandage.
Invisible man?
He said.
I am an invisible man.
Repeated the voice. The story he had been active to ridicule only that morning rushed through Kemp's brain. He does not appear to have been either very much frightened or very greatly surprised at the moment. Realization came later.
I thought it was a lie.
He said. The thought uppermost in his mind was the reiterated arguments of the morning.
Have you a bandage on?
He asked.
Yes.
Said the invisible man.
Oh.
Said Kemp, and then roused himself.
I say,
He said.
this is nonsense. It's some trick.
He stepped forward suddenly, and his hand, extended towards the bandage, met invisible fingers. He recoiled at the touch, and his color changed.
Keep steady, Kemp, for God's sake. I want help badly. Stop.
The hand gripped his arm. He struck at it.
Kemp?
Cried the voice,
Kemp, keep steady.
and the grip tightened. A frantic desire to free himself took possession of Kemp. The hand of the bandaged arm gripped his shoulder, and he was suddenly tripped and flung backwards upon the bed. He opened his mouth to shout, and the corner of the sheet was thrust between his teeth. The invisible man had him down grimly, but his arms were free, and he struck and tried to kick savagely.
Listen to reason, will you?
Said the invisible man, sticking to him in spite of a pounding in the ribs.
High heaven, you'll madden me in a minute. Lie still, you fool.
Bawled the invisible man in Kemp's ear. Kemp struggled for another moment, and then lay still.
If you shout, I'll smash your face.
Said the invisible man, relieving his mouth.
I'm an invisible man. It's no foolishness and no magic. I really am an invisible man, and I want your help. I don't want to hurt you, but if you behave like a frantic rustic, I must. Don't you remember me, Kemp, Griffin of University College?
Let me get up.
Said Kemp.
I'll stop where I am and let me sit quiet for a minute.
He sat up and felt his neck.
I am Griffin of University College, and I've made myself invisible. I'm just an ordinary man, a man you have known, made invisible.
Griffin?
Said Kemp.
Griffin.
Answered the voice.
A younger student than you were, almost an albino, 6 feet high and broad, with a pink and white face and red eyes, who won the medal for chemistry.
I am confused.
Said Kemp.
My brain is rioting. What has this to do with Griffin?
I am Griffin.
Kemp thought.
It's horrible.
He said.
But what devilry must happen to a man to make him invisible?
It's no devilry, it's a process, sane and intelligible enough.
It's horrible.
Said Kemp.
How on earth?
It's horrible enough. But I'm wounded and in pain and tired. Great God, Kemp, you are a man. Take it steady. Give me some food and drink and let me sit down here.
Kemp stared at the bandage as it moved across the room, and then saw a basket chair dragged across the floor and come to rest near the bed. It creaked, and the seat was depressed the 1/4 of an inch or so. He rubbed his eyes and felt his neck again.
This beats ghosts,
he said, and laughed stupidly.
That's better. Thank heaven you're getting sensible.
or silly.
Said Kemp, and knuckled his eyes.
Give me some whiskey. I'm near dead.
It didn't feel so. Where are you? If I get up, shall I run into you? There. All right. Whiskey. Here. Where shall I give it to you?
The chair creaked, and Kemp felt the glass drawn away from him. He let go by an effort. His instinct was all against it. It came to rest, poised 20 inches above the front edge of the seat of the chair. He stared at it in infinite perplexity.
This must be hypnotism. You have suggested you are invisible.
Nonsense,
said the voice.
It's frantic.
Listen to me.
I demonstrated conclusively this morning
began Kemp.
that invisibility...
Never mind what you've demonstrated. I'm starving,
said the voice.
and the night is chilly to a man without clothes.
Food?
Said Kemp. The tumbler of whiskey tilted itself,
Yes.
said the invisible man, wrapping it down.
Have you a dressing gown?
Kemp made some exclamation in an undertone. He walked to a wardrobe and produced a robe of dingy scarlet.
This do?
He asked. It was taken from him. It hung limp for a moment in mid-air, fluttered weirdly, stood full and decorous, buttoning itself, and sat down in his chair.
Drawers, socks, slippers would be a comfort.
Said the unseen, curtly.
And food.
Anything. But this is the insanest thing I ever was in my life.
He turned out his drawers for the articles, and then went downstairs to ransack his larder. He came back with some cold cutlets and bread, pulled up a light table, and placed them before his guest.
Oh, never mind knives,
said his visitor, and a cutlet hung in mid-air with a sound of gnawing.
Invisible,
said Kemp, and sat down on a bedroom chair.
I always like to get something about me before I eat.
Said the invisible man, with a full mouth, eating greedily.
Queer fancy.
I suppose that wrist is all right,
said Kemp.
Trust me,
said the invisible man.
Of all the strange and wonderful...
Exactly. But it's odd I should blunder into your house to get my bandaging. My first stroke of luck. Anyhow, I meant to sleep in this house tonight. You must stand that. Oh, it's a filthy nuisance, my blood showing, isn't it? Quite a clot over there. Gets visible as it coagulates, I see. It's only the living tissue I've changed, and only for as long as I'm alive. I've been in the house for 3 hours.
But how's it done?
Began Kemp in a tone of exasperation.
Confound it! The whole business! It's unreasonable from beginning to end.
Quite reasonable,
said the invisible man.
Perfectly reasonable.
He reached over and secured the whiskey bottle. Kemp stared at the devouring dressing gown. A ray of candlelight penetrating a torn patch in the right shoulder made a triangle of light under the left ribs.
What were the shots?
He asked.
How did the shooting begin?
Oh, there was a real fool of a man, a sort of confederate of mine, curse him, who tried to steal my money. Has done so.
Is he invisible too?
No.
Well?
Can't I have some more to eat before I tell you all that? I'm hungry, in pain, and you want me to tell stories.
Kemp got up.
You didn't do any shooting?
He asked.
Not me,
said his visitor.
Some fool I'd never seen fired at a random. A lot of them got scared. They all got scared at me. Cursed them. I say, I want more to eat than this, Kemp.
I'll see what there is to eat downstairs,
said Kemp.
Not much, I'm afraid.
After he had done eating, and he made a heavy meal, the invisible man demanded a cigar. He bit the end savagely before Kemp could find a knife, and cursed when the outer leaf loosened. It was strange to see him smoking. His mouth and throat, pharynx and nares became visible as a sort of whirling smoke cast.
Oh, this blessed gift of smoking,
he said, and puffed vigorously.
I'm lucky to have fallen upon you, Kemp. You must help me. Fancy tumbling on you just now. I'm in a devilish scrape. I've been mad, I think. The things I've been through. But we will do things yet. Let me tell you.
He helped himself to more whiskey and soda. Kemp got up, looked about him, and fetched a glass from his spare room.
It's wild. But I suppose I may drink.
You haven't changed much, Kemp, these dozen years. You fair men don't. Cool and methodical after the first collapse. I must tell you, we will work together.
But how was it all done?
Said Kemp.
And how did you get like this?
Oh, for God's sake, let me smoke in peace for a little while. And then I will begin to tell you.
But the story was not told that night. The Invisible Man's wrist was growing painful. He was feverish, exhausted, and his mind came round to brood upon his chase down the hill and his struggle about the inn. He spoke in fragments of marvel. He smoked faster. His voice grew angry. Kemp tried to gather what he could.
He was afraid of me. I could see that he was afraid of me,
said the Invisible Man many times over.
He meant to give me the slip. He was always casting about. What a fool I was. The cur! I should have him killed.
Where did you get the money?
Asked Kemp abruptly. The Invisible Man was silent for a space.
I can't tell you tonight,
he said. He groaned suddenly and leant forward, supporting his invisible head on invisible hands.
Kemp,
he said.
I've had no sleep for near 3 days, except a couple of doses of an hour or so. I must sleep soon.
Well, have my room. I have this room.
But how can I sleep? If I sleep, he will get away. What does it matter?
What's the shot wound?
Asked Kemp abruptly.
Nothing. Scratch and blood. Oh God, how I want sleep.
Why not?
The Invisible Man appeared to be regarding Kemp.
Because I've a particular objection to being caught by my fellow men, he
said slowly. Kemp started.
Fool that I am,
said the Invisible Man, striking the table smartly.
I've put the idea into your head.
Chapter 18. The Invisible Man Sleeps. Exhausted and wounded as the Invisible Man was, he refused to accept Kemp's word that his freedom should be respected. He examined the 2 windows of the bedroom, drew up the blinds, and opened the sashes, to confirm Kemp's statement that a retreat by them would be possible. Outside, the night was very quiet and still, and the new moon was setting over the down. Then he examined the keys of the bedroom and the 2 dressing room doors to satisfy himself that these also could be made in assurance of freedom. Finally, he expressed himself satisfied. He stood on the hearth rug, and Kemp heard the sound of a yawn.
I'm sorry,
said the Invisible Man,
if I cannot tell you all that I have done tonight. But I am worn out. It's grotesque, no doubt. It's horrible. But believe me, Kemp, in spite of your arguments of this morning, it is quite a possible thing. I've made a discovery. I meant to keep it to myself. I can't. I must have a partner. And you... we can do such things. But tomorrow... Now, Kemp, I feel as though I must sleep or perish.
Kemp stood in the middle of the room, staring at the headless garment.
I suppose I must leave you,
he said.
It's incredible. 3 things happening like this, overturning all my preconceptions, would make me insane. But it's real. Is there anything more that I can get you?
Only bid me good night,
said Griffin.
Good night,
said Kemp, and shook an invisible hand. He walked sideways to the door. Suddenly, the dressing gown walked quickly towards him.
Understand me,
said the dressing gown.
No attempts to hamper me, or capture me, or...
Kemp's face changed a little.
I thought I gave you my word,
he said. Kemp closed the door softly behind him, and the key was turned upon him forthwith. Then, as he stood with an expression of passive amazement on his face, the rapid feet came to the door of the dressing room, and that too was locked. Kemp slapped his brow with his hand.
Am I dreaming? Has the world gone mad? Or have I?
He laughed and put his hand to the locked door.
Barred out of my own bedroom by a flagrant absurdity,
he said. He walked to the head of the staircase, turned, and stared at the locked door.
It's fact.
He said. He put his fingers to his slightly bruised neck.
Undeniable fact. But...
He shook his head hopelessly, turned, and went downstairs. He lit the dining room lamp, got out a cigar, and began pacing the room. Now and then, he would argue with himself.
Invisible,
he said.
Is there such a thing as an invisible animal? In the sea, yes. Thousands, millions. All the larvae, all the little nauplii and tornades, all the microscopic things, the jellyfish. In the sea, there are more things invisible than visible. I never thought of that before. And in the ponds, too, all those little pond life things, specks of colourless, translucent jelly. But in the air, no, it can't be. But after all, why not? If a man was made of glass, he would still be visible.
His meditation became profound. The bulk of 3 cigars had passed into the invisible, or diffused as a white ash over the carpet before he spoke again. Then it was merely an exclamation. He turned aside, walked out of the room, and went into his little consulting room and lit the gas there. It was a little room, because Dr. Kemp did not live by practice, and in it were the day's newspapers. The morning's paper lay carelessly opened and thrown aside. He caught it up, turned it over, and read the account of a strange story from Iping that the mariner at Port Stowe had spelt over so painfully to Mr. Marvel. Kemp read it swiftly.
Wrapped up?
Said Kemp.
Disguised? Hiding it? No one seems to have been aware of his misfortune. What the devil is his game?
He dropped the paper, and his eye went seeking.
Ah,
he said, and caught up the St. James Gazette, lying folded up as it arrived.
Now we shall get to the truth,
said Dr. Kemp. He rent the paper open. A couple of columns confronted him. An entire village in Sussex goes mad, was the heading.
Good heavens,
said Kemp, reading eagerly an incredulous account of the events in Iping of the previous afternoon that have already been described. Over the leaf, the report in the morning paper had been reprinted. He reread it.
Ran through the streets striking right and left, Jaffers insensible, Mr. Huckster in great pain, still unable to describe what he saw, painful humiliation, vicar, woman ill with terror, windows smashed, this extraordinary story probably a fabrication, too good not to print, cum grano.
He dropped the paper and stared blankly in front of him.
Probably a fabrication.
He caught up the paper again and reread the whole business.
But when does the tramp come in? Why the deuce was he chasing a tramp?
He sat down abruptly on the surgical bench.
He's not only invisible,
he said,
but he's mad, homicidal.
When dawn came to mingle its pallor with the lamplight and cigar smoke of the dining room, Kemp was still pacing up and down, trying to grasp the incredible. He was altogether too excited to sleep. His servants, descending sleepily, discovered him, and were inclined to think that overstudy had worked this ill on him. He gave them extraordinary but quite explicit instructions to lay breakfast for 2 in the Belvedere study, and then to confine themselves to the basement and ground floor. Then he continued to pace the dining room until the morning's paper came. That had much to say and little to tell, beyond the confirmation of the evening before, and a very badly written account of another remarkable tale from Port Burdock. This gave Kemp the essence of the happenings at the Jolly Cricketers, and the name of Marvel.
He has made me keep with him 24 hours,
Marvel testified. Certain minor facts were added to the Iping story, notably the cutting of the village telegraph wire, but there was nothing to throw light on the connection between the invisible man and the tramp, for Mr. Marvel had supplied no information about the 3 books, or the money with which he was lined. The incredulous tone had vanished, and a shoal of reporters and inquirers were already at work elaborating the matter. Kemp read every scrap of the report, and sent his housemaid out to get every one of the morning papers she could. These also he devoured.
He is invisible,
he said.
and it reads like rage growing to mania. The things he may do! The things he may do! And he's upstairs, free as the air! What on earth ought I to do? For instance, would it be a breach of faith if... No.
He went to a little untidy desk in the corner and began a note. He tore this up half-written and wrote another. He read it over and considered it. Then he took an envelope and addressed it to Colonel 80, Port Burdock. The Invisible Man awoke even as Kemp was doing this. He awoke in an evil temper, and Kemp, alert for every sound, heard his pattering feet rush suddenly across the bedroom overhead. Then a chair was flung over, and the wash-hand stand tumbler smashed. Kemp hurried upstairs and rapped eagerly. Chapter 19. Certain First Principles.
What's the matter?
Asked Kemp when the Invisible Man admitted him.
Nothing.
Was the answer.
But confound it, the smash!
A fit of temper,
said the Invisible Man.
Forgot this arm, and it's sore.
You're rather liable to that sort of thing.
I am.
Kemp walked across the room and picked up the fragments of broken glass.
All the facts are out about you,
said Kemp, standing up with the glass in his hand.
All that happened in Iping and down the hill, the world has become aware of its invisible citizen, but no one knows you are here.
The Invisible Man swore.
The secret's out. I gather it was a secret. I don't know what your plans are, but of course I'm anxious to help you.
The Invisible Man sat down on the bed.
There's breakfast upstairs,
said Kemp, speaking as easily as possible, and he was delighted to find his strange guest rose willingly. Kemp led the way up the narrow staircase to the Belvedere.
Before we can do anything else,
said Kemp,
I must understand a little bit more about this invisibility of yours.
He had sat down after one nervous glance out of the window, with the air of a man who has talking to do. His doubts of the sanity of the entire business flashed and vanished again as he looked across to where Griffin sat at the breakfast table, a headless, handless dressing gown wiping unseen lips on a miraculously held serviette.
It's simple enough, and credible enough,
said Griffin, putting the serviette aside and leaning the invisible head on an invisible hand.
No doubt, to you, but...
Kemp laughed.
Well, yes, to me it seemed wonderful at first, no doubt. But now, great God! But we will do great things yet. I came on the stuff first at Chesiltoe.
Chesilstowe?
I went there after I left London. You know, I dropped medicine and took up physics? No, well, I did. Light fascinated me.
Ah.
Optical density. The whole subject is a network of riddles, a network with solutions glimmering elusively through. And being but 22 and full of enthusiasm, I said, I will devote my life to this. This is worthwhile. You know what fools we are at 22.
Fools then, or fools now?
Said Kemp.
As though knowing could be any satisfaction to a man. But I went to work, like a slave, and I had hardly worked and thought about the matter 6 months before light came through one of the meshes suddenly, blindingly. I found a general principle of pigments and refraction, a formula, a geometrical expression involving 4 dimensions. Fools, common men, even common mathematicians do not know anything of what some general expression may mean to the student of molecular physics. In the books that Tramp has hidden, there are marvels, miracles. But this was not a method, it was an idea that might lead to a method by which it would be possible, without changing any other property of matter, except in some instances colors, to lower the refractive index of a substance, solid or liquid, to that of air, so far as all practical purposes are concerned.
Phew,
said Kemp.
that's odd, but I still don't see quite. I can understand that thereby you could spoil a valuable stone, but personal invisibility is a far cry.
Precisely,
said Griffin.
But consider, visibility depends on the action of the visible bodies on light. Either a body absorbs light, or it reflects or refracts it, or does all these things. If it neither reflects nor refracts nor absorbs light, it cannot of itself be visible. You see an opaque red box, for instance, because the color absorbs some of the light and reflects the rest, all the red part of the light, to you. If it did not absorb any particular part of light, but reflected it all, then it would be a shining white box, silver. A diamond box would neither absorb much of the light nor reflect much of the general surface. But just here and there where the surfaces were favorable, the light would be reflected and refracted, so that you would get a brilliant appearance of flashing reflections and translucencies, a sort of skeleton of light. A glass box would not be so brilliant, nor so clearly visible as a diamond box, because there would be less refraction and reflection. See that? From certain points of view, you would see quite clearly through it. Some kinds of glass would be more visible than others. A box of flint glass would be brighter than a box of ordinary window glass. A box of very thin common glass would be hard to see in a bad light, because it would absorb hardly any light and refract and reflect very little. And if you put a sheet of common white glass in water, still more if you put in some denser liquid than water, it would vanish almost altogether, because light passing from water to glass is only slightly refracted or reflected, or indeed affected in any way. It is almost as invisible as a jet of coal gas or hydrogen is in air, and for precisely the same reason.
Yes,
said Kemp.
that is pretty plain sailing.
And here is another fact you know to be true. If a sheet of glass is smashed, Kemp, and beaten into a powder, it becomes much more visible while it is in the air. It becomes at last an opaque white powder. This is because the powdering multiplies the surfaces of the glass at which refraction and reflection occur. In the sheet of glass, there are only two surfaces. In the powder, the light is reflected or refracted by each grain it passes through, and very little gets right through the powder. But if the white powdered glass is put into water, it forthwith vanishes. The powdered glass and water have much of the same refractive index. That is, the light undergoes a very little refraction or reflection in passing from one to the other. You make glass invisible by putting it into a liquid of nearly the same refractive index. A transparent thing becomes invisible if it is put in any medium of almost the same refractive index. And if you will consider only a second, you will see also that a powder of glass might be made to vanish in air. If its refractive index could be made the same as that of air, for then there would be no refraction or reflection as the light passed from glass to air.
Yes,
said Kemp.
but a man's not powdered glass.
No,
said Griffin.
he is more transparent.
Nonsense.
That from a doctor. How one forgets. Have you already forgotten your physics in 10 years? Just think of all the things that are transparent and seem not to be so. Paper, for instance, is made up of transparent fibers, and it is white and opaque only for the same reason that a powder of glass is white and opaque. oil white paper. Fill up the interstices between the particles with oil so that there is no longer refraction or reflection except at the surfaces, and it becomes as transparent as glass. And not only paper, but cotton fiber, linen fiber, wool fiber, woody fiber, and bone camp, flesh camp, hair camp, nails and nerves camp. In fact, the whole fabric of a man except the red of his blood and the black pigment of hair are all made up of transparent colorless tissue. So little suffices to make us visible one to the other. For the most part, the fibers of a living creature are no more opaque than water.
Great heavens,
said Kemp.
Of course. I was thinking only last night of the sea larvae and all jellyfish.
Now you have me. And all that I knew and had in mind a year after I left London, 6 years ago. But I kept it to myself. I had to do my work under frightful disadvantages. Oliver, my professor, was a scientific bounder, a journalist by instinct, a thief of ideas. He was always prying. And you know the knavish system of the scientific world. I simply would not publish and let him share my credit. I went on working. I got nearer and nearer making my formula into an experiment, a reality. I told no living soul because I meant to flash my work upon the world with crushing effect and become famous at a blow. I took up the question of pigments to fill up certain gaps, and suddenly, not by design but by accident, I made a discovery in physiology.
Yes?
You know the red coloring of blood. It can be made white, colorless, and remain with all the functions it has now.
Kemp gave a cry of incredulous amazement. The invisible man rose and began pacing the little study.
You may well exclaim, I remember that night. It was late at night. In the daytime one was bothered with the gaping silly students, and I worked then sometimes till dawn. It came suddenly, splendid and complete in my mind. I was alone. The laboratory was still, with the tall lights burning brightly and silently. In all my great moments, I have been alone. One could make an animal, a tissue, transparent. One could make it invisible. All except the pigments. I could be invisible, I said, suddenly realizing what it meant to be an albino with such knowledge. It was overwhelming. I left the filtering I was doing and went and stared out the great window at the stars. I could be invisible, I repeated. To do such a thing would be to transcend magic. And I beheld, unclouded by doubt, a magnificent vision of all that invisibility might mean to a man. The mystery, the power, the freedom. Drawbacks I saw none. You have only to think. And I, a shabby, poverty-struck, hemmed-in demonstrator teaching fools in a provincial college, might suddenly become this. I ask you, Kemp, if you, anyone, I tell you, would have flung himself upon that research. And I worked 3 years, and every mountain of difficulty I toiled over showed another from its summit. The infinite details and the exasperation. A professor, a provincial professor, always prying.
When are you going to publish this work of yours?
Was his everlasting question. And the students, the cramped means. 3 years I had of it. And after 3 years of secrecy and exasperation, I found that to complete it was impossible. Impossible!
How?
Asked Kemp.
Money,
said the invisible man, and went again to stare out of the window. He turned around abruptly.
I robbed the old man. Robbed my father. The money was not his. and he shot himself.
Chapter 20. At the house in Great Portland Street. For a moment, Kemp sat in silence, staring at the back of the headless figure at the window. Then he started, struck by a thought, rose, took the invisible man's arm, and turned him away from the outlook.
You are tired,
He said.
and while I sit, you walk about. Have my chair.
He placed himself between Griffin and the nearest window. For a space, Griffin sat silent, and then he resumed abruptly.
I had left the Chiseltoe cottage already,
He said.
when that happened. It was last December. I had taken a room in London, a large unfurnished room of a big ill-managed lodging house in the slum near Great Portland Street. The room was soon full of the appliances I had bought with his money. The work was going on steadily, successfully, drawing near an end. I was like a man emerging from a thicket and suddenly coming on some unmeaning tragedy. I went to bury him. My mind was still on this research, and I did not lift a finger to save his character. I remember the funeral. The cheap hearse, the scant ceremony, the windy, frost-bitten hillside, and the old college friend of his who read the service over him. A shabby, black, bent old man with a snivelling cold. I remember walking back to the empty house through the place that had once been a village and was now patched and tinkered by the jerry builders into the ugly likeness of a town. Every way the road ran out at last into the desecrated fields and ended in rubble heaps and rank wet weeds. I remember myself as a gaunt black figure going along the slippery, shiny pavement, and the strange sense of detachment I felt from the squalid respectability, the sordid commercialism of the place. I did not feel a bit sorry for my father. He seemed to me to be the victim of his own foolish sentimentality. The current can't require my attendance at his funeral, but it was really not my affair. But going along the high street, my old life came back to me for a space, for I met the girl I had known 10 years since. Our eyes met. Something moved me to turn back and talk to her. She was a very ordinary person. It was all like a dream, that visit to the old places. I did not feel then that I was lonely, that I had come out from the world into a desolate place. I appreciated my loss of sympathy, but I put it down to the general inanity of things. Re-entering my room seemed like the recovery of reality. There were the things I knew and loved. There stood the apparatus, the experiments arranged and waiting, and now there was scarcely a difficulty left beyond the planning of details. I will tell you, Kemp, sooner or later, all the complicated processes. We need not go into that now. For the most part, saving certain gaps I chose to remember, they are written in cipher in those books that Tramp has hidden. We must hunt him down. We must get those books again. But the essential phase was to place the transparent object whose refractive index was to be lowered between two radiating centers of a sort of ethereal vibration, of which I will tell you more fully later. No, not those Röntgen vibrations. I don't know what these others of mine have been described. Yet they are obvious enough. I needed 2 little dynamos, and these I worked with a cheap gas engine. My first experiment was with a bit of white wool fabric. It was the strangest thing in the world to see it in the flicker of the flashes soft and white, and then to watch it fade like a wreath of smoke and vanish. I could scarcely believe I had done it. I put my hand into the emptiness, and there was the thing, as solid as ever. I felt it awkwardly and threw it on the floor. I had a little trouble finding it again. And then came a curious experience. I heard a meow behind me, and turning, saw a lean white cat, very dirty, on the cistern cover outside the window. A thought came into my head. "Everything ready for you," I said, and went to the window, opened it, and called it softly. She came in, purring. The poor beast was starving, and I gave her some milk. All my food was in a cupboard in the corner of the room. After that, she went smelling round the room, evidently with the idea of making herself at home. The invisible rag upset her a bit. You should have seen her spit at it. But I made her comfortable on the pillow of my truckle bed. And I gave her butter to get her to wash.
And you processed her?
I processed her. But giving drugs to a cat is no joke, Kemp. And the process failed.
Failed?
In two particulars. These were the claws and the pigment stuff. What is it? At the back of the eye in a cat. You know?
Tapetum.
Yes, the tapetum. It didn't go. After I'd given the stuff to bleach the blood and done certain other things to her, I gave the beast opium and put her and the pillow she was sleeping on the apparatus. And after all the rest had faded and vanished, there remained two little ghosts of her eyes.
Odd.
I can't explain it. She was bandaged and clammed, of course, so I had her safe. But she woke while she was still misty and meowed dismally, and someone came knocking. It was an old woman from downstairs who suspected me of vivisecting. A drink-sodden old creature, with only a white cat to take care for in all the world. I whipped out some chloroform, applied it, and answered the door.
"Did I hear a cat?"
She asked.
"My cat?"
"Not here," said I, very politely. She was a little doubtful and tried to peer past me into the room. Strange enough to her, no doubt. Bare walls, uncurtained windows, truckle bed, with the gas engine vibrating, and the sieve of the radiant points, and that faint, ghastly stinging of chloroform in the air. She had to be satisfied at last and went away again.
How long did it take?
asked Kemp.
3 or 4 hours. The cat. The bones and sinews and the fat were the last to go, and the tips of the colored hairs. And as I say, the back part of the eye, though iridescent stuff it is, wouldn't go at all. It was night outside long before the business was over, and nothing was to be seen but the dim eyes and the claws. I stopped the gas machine, felt for and stroked the beast, which was still insensible, and then, being tired, left it sleeping on the invisible pillow and went to bed. I lay awake, thinking weak, aimless stuff, going over the experiment over and over again, or dreaming feverishly of things growing misty and vanishing about me, until everything, the ground I stood on, vanished, and so I came to that sickly falling nightmare one gets. About 2, the cat began meowing about the room. I tried to hush it by talking to it, and then I decided to turn it out. I remember the shock I had when striking a light. There were just the round eyes shining green, and nothing round them. I would have given it milk, but I hadn't any. It wouldn't be quiet. It just sat down and meowed at the door. I tried to catch it, with an idea of putting it out of the window, but it wouldn't be caught. It vanished. And then it began meowing in different parts of the room. At last I opened the window and made a bustle. I suppose it went out at last. I never saw any more of it. Then, heaven knows why, I fell thinking of my father's funeral again, and the dismal, windy hillside until the day had come. I found sleeping was hopeless, and locking my door after me, wandered out into the morning streets.
You don't mean to say there's an invisible cat at large?
Said Kemp.
If it hasn't been killed,
Said the Invisible Man.
why not?
Why not?
Said Kemp.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's very probably been killed.
Said the Invisible Man.
It was alive 4 days after, I know, and down a grating in Great Titchfield Street, because I saw a crowd round the place trying to see whence the meowing came.
He was silent for the best part of a minute. Then he resumed abruptly.
I remember that morning before the change very vividly. I must have gone up Great Portland Street. I remember the barracks in Albany Street and the horse soldiers coming out, and at last I found the summit of Primrose Hill. It was a sunny day in January, one of those sunny, frosty days that came before the snow this year. My weary brain tried to formulate a position, to plot out a plan of action. I was surprised to find, now that my prize was within my grasp, how inconclusive its attainment seemed. As a matter of fact, I was worked out. The intense stress of nearly 4 years' continuous work left me incapable of any strength of feeling. I was apathetic, and I tried in vain to recover the enthusiasm of my first inquiries, the passion of discovery that had enabled me to compass even the downfall of my father's grey hairs. Nothing seemed to matter. I saw pretty clearly this was a transient mood, due to overwork and want of sleep, and that either by drugs or rest it would be possible to recover my energies. All I could think clearly was that the thing had to be carried through. The fixed idea still ruled me. And soon, for the money I had was almost exhausted. I looked about me at the hillside with children playing and girls watching them, and tried to think of all the fantastic advantages an invisible man would have in this world. After a time, I crawled home, took some food and a strong dose of strychnine, and went to sleep in my clothes on my unmade bed. Strychnine is a grand tonic, Kemp, to take the flabbiness out of a man.
It's the devil,
Said Kemp.
It's Paleolithic in a bottle.
I awoke vastly invigorated and rather irritable. You know.
I know the stuff.
And there was someone rapping at the door. It was my landlord with threats and inquiries, an old Polish Jew in a long grey coat and greasy slippers. I had been tormenting a cat in the night, he was sure. The old woman's tongue had been busy. He insisted on knowing all about it. The laws in this country against vivisection were very severe. He might be liable. I denied the cat. Then the vibration of the little gas engine could be felt all over the house, he said. That was true, certainly. He edged around me into the room, peering about over his German silver spectacles, and a sudden dread came into my mind that he might carry away something of my secret. I tried to keep between him and the concentrating apparatus I had arranged, and that only made him more curious. What was I doing? Why was I always alone and secretive? Was it legal? Was it dangerous? I paid nothing but the usual rent. His had always been a most respectable house in a disreputable neighborhood. Suddenly, my temper gave way. I told him to get out. He began to protest, to jabber of his right of entry, In a moment, I had him by the collar. Something ripped and he went spinning out into his own passage. I slammed and locked the door and sat down quivering. He made a fuss outside, which I disregarded, and after a time he went away. But this brought matters to a crisis. I did not know what he would do, nor even what he had the power to do. To move to fresh apartments would have meant delay. Altogether, I had barely £20 left in the world, for the most part in a bank, and I could not afford that. Vanish! It was irresistible. Then there would be an inquiry, the sacking of my room. At the thought of the possibility of my work being exposed or interrupted at its very climax, I became very angry and active. I hurried out with my 3 books of notes, my checkbook, the tramp has them now, and directed them to the nearest post office to a house of call for letters and parcels in Great Portland Street. I tried to go out noiselessly. Coming in, I found my landlord going quietly upstairs. He had heard the door close, I suppose. You would have laughed to see him jump aside on the landing as I came tearing after him. He glared at me as I went by him, and I made the house quiver with the slamming of my door. I heard him come shuffling up to my floor, hesitate, and go down. I set to work upon my preparations forthwith. It was all done that evening and night. While I was still sitting under the sickly, drowsy influence of the drugs that decolorize blood, there came a repeated knocking at the door. It ceased. Footsteps went away and returned, and the knocking was resumed. There was an attempt to push something under the door, a blue paper. Then, in a fit of irritation, I rose and went and flung the door wide open. "Now then," said I. It was my landlord, with a notice of ejectment or something. He held it out to me, saw something odd about my hands, I expect, and lifted his eyes to my face. For a moment, he gaped. Then he gave a sort of inarticulate cry, dropped candle and writ together, and went blundering down the dark passage to the stairs. I shut the door, locked it, and went to the looking-glass. Then I understood his terror. My face was white, like white stone. But it was all horrible. I had not expected the suffering. A night of racking anguish, sickness and fainting. I set my teeth, though my skin was presently afire, all my body was afire. But I lay there like grim death. I understood now how it was the cat had howled until I chloroformed it. Lucky it was I lived alone and untended in my room. There were times I sobbed and groaned and talked, but I stuck to it. I became insensible and woke languid in the darkness. The pain had passed. I thought I was killing myself, and I did not care. I shall never forget that dawn and the strange horror of seeing that my hands had become like clouded glass, and watching them grow clearer and thinner as the day went by, until at last I could see the sickly disorder of my room through them, though I closed my transparent eyelids. My limbs became glassy, the bones and arteries faded, vanished, and the little white nerves went last. I gritted my teeth and stayed there to the end. At last, only the dead tips of the fingernails remained, pallid and white, and a brown stain of some acid upon my fingers. I struggled up. At first I was as incapable as a swathed infant, stepping with limbs I could not see. I was weak and very hungry. I went and stared at nothing in my shaving glass, at nothing save for an attenuated pigment still remained behind the retina of my eyes, fainter than mist. I had to hang on to the table and press my forehead against the glass. It was only by a frantic effort of will that I dragged myself back to the apparatus and completed the process. I slept during the forenoon, pulling the sheet over my eyes to shut out the light, and about midday I was awakened again by a knocking. My strength had returned. I sat up and listened and heard a whispering. I sprang to my feet and as noiselessly as possible began to detach the connections of my apparatus and to distribute it about the room so as to destroy the suggestions of its arrangement. Presently the knocking was renewed and voices called, first my landlord's and then 2 others. To gain time I answered them. The invisible rag and pillow came to hand, and I opened the window and pitched them out onto the cistern cover. As the window opened, a heavy crash came at the door. Someone had charged it with the idea of smashing the lock, but the stout bolts I had screwed up some days before stopped him. That startled me, made me angry. I began to tremble and do things hurriedly. I tossed together some loose paper, straw, packing paper, and so forth in the middle of the room and turned on the gas. Heavy blows began to rain upon the door. I could not find the matches. I beat my hands on the wall with rage. I turned down the gas again, stepped out of the window on the cistern cover, very softly lowered the sash and sat down, secure and invisible, but quivering with anger, to watch events. They split a panel, I saw, and in another moment they had broken away the staples of the bolts and stood in the open doorway. It was the old landlord and his 2 stepsons, sturdy young men of 3 or 24. Behind them fluttered the old hag of a woman from downstairs. You may imagine their astonishment to find the room empty. One of the younger men rushed to the window at once, flung it open, and stared out. His staring eyes and thick-lipped, bearded face came a foot from my face. I was half of mind to hit his silly countenance, but I arrested my doubled fist. He stared right through me. So did the others as they joined him. The old man went and peered under the bed, and then they all made a rush for the cupboard. They had to argue about it at length in Yiddish and Cockney English. They concluded I had not answered them, that their imagination had deceived them. A feeling of extraordinary elation took the place of my anger as I sat outside the window and watched these 4 people. For the old lady came in, glancing suspiciously about like a cat, trying to understand the riddle of my behavior. The old man, so far as I could understand his patois, agreed with the old lady that I was a vivisectionist. The sons protested in garbled English that I was an electrician and appealed to the dynamos and radiators. They were all nervous about my arrival, although I found subsequently that they had bolted the front door. The old lady peered into the cupboard and under the bed, and one of the young men pushed the register and stared up the chimney. One of my fellow lodgers, a costermonger who shared the opposite room with a butcher, appeared on the landing, and he was called in and told incoherent things. It occurred to me that the radiators, if they fell into the hands of some acute, well-educated person, would give me away too much, and watching my opportunity, I came into the room and tilted one of the little dynamos off its fellow on which it was standing, and smashed both apparatus. Then, while they were trying to explain the smash, I dodged out of the room and went softly downstairs. I went into one of the sitting rooms and waited until they came down, still speculating and argumentative, all a little disappointed at finding no horrors, and all a little puzzled how they stood legally towards me. Then I slipped up again with a box of matches, fired my heap of paper and rubbish, putting the chairs and bedding thereby, lit the gas to the affair by means of an India rubber tube, and waving a farewell to the room, left it for the last time.
You fired the house?
exclaimed Kemp.
Fired the house. It was the only way to cover my trail, and no doubt it was insured. I slipped the bolts of the front door quietly and went out into the street. I was invisible, and I was only just beginning to realize the extraordinary advantage my invisibility gave me. My head was already teeming with plans of all the wild and wonderful things I had now impunity to do.
What's up, everybody? Lone Wolf here. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to tonight's video. In case anyone is interested, all of the various elements used in this video, including pictures, music, sound effects, and stories, will be linked in the description below. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss a new video. If anybody has any personal stories or story recommendations for me, or any advice to help improve the channel, there will be links to all of my social media platforms in the description. I'm mostly active on Twitter and on Instagram, but I also have an email, a Discord server, and a TikTok account that you can message me on as well. Until next time, stay spooky. And remember,
the hunt begins when the moon is full.